Welcome to the Honest Homestead channel. Today, we'll explore what happens if you plant like Native Americans did 1,000 years ago. We'll also explore the Three Sisters method. You've probably heard the story of living in harmony with nature. It is a warm story, and most of it is only half the truth. Picture a single cornstalk standing alone in a field at first light. Plant corn like that, one crop by itself, and by August, you have a thin harvest and bare dirt where food should be. The name Three Sisters comes from the Haudenosaunee and other northeastern nations. But it was never a story about being kind to the earth. It was an engineered farming system with real rules and a real limit. Get it wrong, and it costs you. Calories and protein gone off the acre, the difference between a full root cellar in November and a hungry one. So we will walk it, where it came from, why it works, where the internet story breaks, how you build one, and where it stops. This is groundwork. I dig up how an old method really works and hand it to you straight, no folklore. To understand it, go back 9,000 years to a valley in Mexico. So go stand in a dry valley in central Mexico roughly 9,000 years ago. There is no corn here yet. There is a wild grass called teosinte, waist-high, with a hard little spike of seeds you could never make a meal from. That is where corn begins. People worked that grass season after season, patch after patch. They kept the plants with the biggest, softest kernels and put those seeds back in the ground next season, over and over, generation after generation. Slowly, the little spike grew into an ear. By 9,000 years ago, they had already worked teosinte into something close to the corn you would know. Now go east and forward a few thousand years to the gardens along the rivers of the eastern United States. Squash was growing there, a kind called cucurbita pepo, planted and picked in home gardens around 5,000 years ago. That is a long way, in miles and in time, from a valley of wild grass in Mexico. So keep count. Corn, 9,000 years back in Mexico. Squash, 5,000 years back in the east. Two of the Three Sisters, and they did not start in the same place or the same age. The third one is not here yet. Now watch the gap close. Around 1300, a third seed finally goes into that northeastern mound. Corn and squash had already stood on that ground a long while before she showed up. Around 1300, in the northeast, a pair of hands presses a bean seed into a mound where corn and squash already stand. That is where the record puts it. One seed, and the mound finally does what neither crop could pull off alone: feed itself. Press that bean in, and the three at last share one hill: the tall one, the feeder, the cover. So finish the count. Beans arrive only around 1300, and only here in the northeast. The last sister, the slow one. So now, at last, all three stand in one mound together. That is where the real work starts. Three plants, one mound. Why does that beat planting each alone? Each does one job the others can't, and none for free. Start with the corn. A stalk grows 7 to 10 feet, stiff enough to give a climbing bean a living pole to wind up. No stakes to pound in every spring. The corn stands up, the bean grabs on, and the corn was going to stand there anyway. The tall one holds up the climber. Now the roots where the bean pays the corn back. Corn is hungry. It pulls nitrogen out of the soil fast, and nitrogen is the first thing a garden runs short of. Bean roots host bacteria in little nodules that pull nitrogen straight from the air. A living fertilizer factory, and the corn feeds on the leftovers. Last, the dirt between them. Bare ground dries out and breeds weeds. Squash leaves spread low and wide, a leafy blanket that keeps the soil damp and starves the weeds of light. 4 or 5 corn to a mound, a few beans at the base, squash at the edge. 3 jobs, 1 hill. None of it magic. But swap the order or crowd the mound wrong, and that same system turns on itself. 3 jobs, 1 mound on paper. So, did anyone go out and check it in a real field? Somebody did. A Cornell researcher named Jane Mount Pleasant went and grew the old mounds herself and weighed what came off them, not a story about it. She lined those yields up against the early European fields of the same country, the ones plowed and planted before anybody was hauling in fertilizer. The 3 sisters held their own. Same ground, no fertilizer bought, and the old mounds stood right up next to the new fields. Here is the part that pays off. Grow corn, beans, and squash together on one mound, and that mound feeds more people than any one of those 3 grown alone on the same square of dirt. In her published work, the mound gave close to 1/3 more food energy off the acre than corn grown straight. Not corn against corn, but the 3 of them together against the best single crop you could plant in that spot. And together wins. Think about what that means for a root cellar in November. The mixed mound doesn't just fill the shelf, it fills it with corn for bread, beans for the protein, and squash that keeps for months. 1 acre, 3 foods, and a fuller cellar than a straight cornfield of the same size would ever give you. So this was never the ancestors getting lucky. It's a system somebody built and measured, and it beat the single crop on the numbers. Build it right, and the numbers hold up. But where does the popular version of this story start cutting corners? The numbers hold up. Now, here is how you actually build one, and the order matters more than anything. You do not plant all 3 the same day. You plant in turns, weeks apart, starting with corn. Build the mound first. A low hill of earth about 1 foot high, loose and mounded up, not a flat row. Whether growers worked fish scraps into the mound is argued among historians. It was not the rule everywhere. Corn goes in first and alone. 4 or 5 kernels in the top, then you wait until it stands knee-high on its own. The corn is the pole, so it has to get up ahead of the bean. Plant the bean too soon, and it grabs a stalk still soft and pulls it right down. Now the bean and squash go in around the corn. Beans close at the base to climb the stalk, squash out at the edges where those broad leaves sprawl and cover the ground. And watch the last mistake. Squash rushed in early shades out your seedlings before they get going. Space the planting out like that, weeks apart, and every plant gets its own head start. Get the order wrong, and the whole mound turns on itself. Get it right, and now we have to talk about where this thing has an honest limit. Here is the honest limit. The bean hands the corn some nitrogen back, but the corn takes out more than the bean ever puts in. So the ground keeps losing a little more than it gains. Plant the same mound with nothing feeding it, and in a few seasons, the ground wears out. The method only slows the wear, it never stops it. So no fertilizer ever breaks right there. The old growers rested the ground and moved the patch to let it come back. Strip that away, and the garden runs out of nitrogen. Crowd the mound too tight, and the 3 fight for light and water. Too dry, and the corn never becomes a pole. Check your own frost line first. Up north, the season is too short to plant 3 weeks apart, and they all pile in at once. Now go back to that lone cornstalk at dawn. It was never about the plants. A tall crop, a soil feeder, A ground cover. 3 jobs on 1 patch. The dirt kept covered. Fill the tall crop job another way, and a plain wooden pole can stand in for the corn. It was never the plants. It was the plan. So look at your own ground. Name your 3 jobs and pick which plant you would put on each one first. That is my groundwork. I walk you through the land, the history, and the plain, hard-won sense that ties them together.